When thinking about mental health, it can seem like this mysterious black box. We all know how to take care of ourselves physically, like you should eat healthier foods and avoid junk food and do more exercise. But how do you take care of your mind or your mental health? This video will provide a good place to start for anyone looking to improve their own or a loved one's mental health. If you're new to this channel, my name is Jeff, a board-certified and licensed occupational therapist practicing in America. My goal is to increase awareness about the profession of occupational therapy to help people live healthier and happier lives. If this resonates with you, be sure to subscribe to this channel for more content. Let's get functional. Just like how your chances of success for improving your physical health requires some sort of plan that is realistic and attainable, so does your mental health. Whether it's for self-care or to the more serious for someone who's considering even hurting themselves or others, having a well thought out plan is a good place to start. And just like for, say, natural disasters like earthquakes here where I live and hurricanes somewhere else in the country, having a safety plan helps you to prepare for when times may get rough and when emotions may be involved and when you're less likely to think clearly. Studies actually show that people who have a safety plan are more likely to have reduced chances of harming themselves or others. So before we start, there's a good time and a bad time to come up with a safety plan. A good time is when you're in a good mental state and more normal, so to speak. A bad time would be when you're feeling more blue or depressed or angry and less like yourself. Let's get into the parts now of a mental health safety plan. The first part of your plan is, well, safety. What can you do to make yourself or someone else, if you're doing this for a family member or loved one, to make them safe in times of poor mental health and for those around them too? One way is to make the environment safer, say by removing dangerous things such as firearms, sharp objects, medications, recreational drugs, by at least either locking them up or making them just less accessible. If you don't know how to make your environment safer, a good idea is to talk to someone who knows you well and knows like what your place is like and you're comfortable working with and talking to about. But what if you live alone? Well, there are places you can call, such as hotlines, who may be able to help, or you can call for professional help for mental health, such as a counselor or a therapist. And safety isn't just related to the things that can do you immediate harm. It could be long-term, over time, that can harm you in your body. That could be, say, alcohol. I mentioned drugs and medications. It could even be something like keys to your car if you're prone to, say, being very angry and aggression and road rage. And I mentioned environment, so it's not really just limited to your immediate environment, say where you live, but places you may go to that may be considered dangerous to yourself or to others. So this may involve making bigger life changes that may involve even moving to a new place. If ultimately it will make you safer, I think that is something worth considering. The second part to a safety plan is involving having a plan B or even a plan C. What do I mean? Well, for more serious situations, that may require a more serious plan compared to, say, another situation where you may just be feeling down and not yourself or maybe feeling depressed. Of course, having some plan is better than no plan at all, but if possible, try to come up with, say, a plan B or a plan C. And while it may be easy to have all of this information in your head, it can be hard to keep track of all this stuff. So a good idea is to write this out, such as on a app or like on your phone's notepad where it's, locked up by and secured by your phone, but you have easy access to it because we tend to forget things, such as small details, especially when our minds may be clouded by poor mental health and things like even lack of sleep or insomnia, or when we have emotions like anger. The third part of the safety plan is someone to contact or call when you're feeling down or unsafe. It could be a partner, family member, neighbor, therapist, pastor, anyone you feel comfortable with and safe telling them your situation during tough times. When considering someone, they should be a reliable person, someone who is non-judgmental, and someone you can trust, of course, during your times of your most vulnerable. If the person you have in mind tends to say gossip or is non-reliable, then there may be someone else you can contact. This can be a medical professional, therapist, and hotlines. And I'll post a link to some of these resources and numbers that you can call. This will, of course, depend on where you live, and I know a lot of you guys watch my videos internationally, so you can probably do a Google search for more of these resources too. And sometimes you don't even need to place a phone call too, by the way. You can do it via text message or chat to get help. Besides having someone in mind as a contact for your mental health safety plan, you should also let them know ahead of time if and when this does happen. That way they don't get surprised and they'll be better prepared to support you because they already know about the plan that's in place. And so it's also important to keep them updated on your most recent plan and what you would like to do, for example. And if you have the means and the finances or the insurance, a good idea is for a second person to be a professional mental health professional. So these include occupational therapists, psychologists, doctors, counselors, or anyone else who is trained in mental health to help you with your unique situation, because everyone's situation is different. So I am providing general advice, but at the end of the day, getting personalized advice is the best. The fourth part of this 5-part plan, and arguably the most important part, is considering what your reasons worth living are. What brings you happiness or joy? And it could be anything. It can be your kid. It could be a pet, a favorite type of food, an activity that you like doing, or you like to do in the past, but you may have kind of fallen out of it. A favorite place you like to go to, watching the sunset, a favorite season or holiday like Christmas, or like when it's snowing outside or raining, or a favorite hobby or interest. And it could be anything that you find interesting. And it doesn't need to be super incredible, just something that is positive and meaningful to you. This thing or list of things are unique to you. And I realize that it may be hard to come up with things like this when times get difficult. So again, it's important to make this plan when you are at least in a somewhat of a good headspace. It could be maybe when you wake up in the morning, or after you've eaten and you're energized, or when you've gotten a good night's rest or taken a nap, whatever it may be. You know when it's a best time for you to come up with a plan to help you in case when times get rough. And you can jot down, or I guess type these things these days for things that come to mind, and brainstorm and add them to this list as time goes on. You'll soon find that your list may have reasons for worth living with 5 items. Even though it may be really hard to come up with these just 5 items or even just 1 item, then maybe one day you'll have 10 and then 50 and then 100. And then it's really cool to scroll through a list of things that are worth living for that you may have even forgotten about. And this can be really helpful because it can remind you to maybe get back into something like getting into gardening and growing plants, for example. And the beauty of all of this, because of our modern technology, is that you can keep this all a secret and private if you want on, say, your smartphone. Or you can share with someone that you enjoy this hobby with and remind them of it too if you guys have fallen out of it, say due to work or just life happening. The fifth and last part is what to do to make you feel better, and it's closely tied to action number 4. Ideally, these would be healthy choices instead of things like alcohol, drugs, gambling, or eating junk food, for example. Not that there's anything wrong with any of these things. You want to be doing more of the healthier things compared to more of the unhealthy things, at least in proportion. Healthier choices can be things like going out for a walk, watching a movie, playing video games with your friends, listening to music, fishing, playing golf, spending time with working on your car, hanging out with your friends, or socializing with them virtually these days, I guess, because of the pandemic, baking with them, and so on. So it all depends on you, right? These are just some examples, and it's really culturally and location dependent, but it's really up to your creativity and your personal interests or your interests with family members or your pets. So even if you can't physically do these things, or when you actually do these things, it can be really hard. Writing it all down so that you can even daydream about it can be very, very helpful. So I think with all this information, it helps to give you an example so that you have a kind of template to go off of. Let me show you an example of a hypothetical safety plan for an imaginary person. Part 1 involves moving things away and securing your environment for safety, right? So things could be like moving knives into storage, safely discarding recreational drugs, or even locking away credit cards because you may be a compulsive spender on things. Instead, they use maybe their debit card as an alternative. And we talked about environment, right? Especially environments around them and to avoid. So this person may want to, for example, avoid the local bar because it may prompt them to drink and may be tempting for them to drink. Or they may want to avoid the casino because they may have an issue with gambling and controlling themselves in their impulsive gambling or compulsive gambling behaviors. In part 2, we talked about how we should have a plan for certain situations. So plan A may be the most important, which is when they may be considering self-harm. So we kind of addressed this with removing firearms and recreational drugs. Part 2 of the plan, say we'll call this plan B, may be when they feel like, say, compulsively spending or compulsively gambling. So that addresses it what we talked about with the debit card, so that they're more likely to see the changes and not rack up debt, and less likely to borrow money or go deeper into debt by gambling, which could then further add to their stress, anxiety, and depression, for example. Part 3 is emergency contact. So this person, for example, has a really good friend that they've known and trusted from college that they really trust and can use as a emergency contact to implement this plan or talk through it, or even just shoot a text to them and say, hey, I feel like gambling again or whatever, so that they can be a good resource and support to help you or a loved one with implementing their plan. All right, the fun part, part 4, reasons worth living. So this person likes to eat pizza. It likes to play with their dog and pet them and spend time with them, and going on nice walks around the neighborhood. Part 5 is self-care and things to consider to help improve your mental health. So for example, this may be even just something as simple as taking a second to breathe when you may have urges, either to say drink or to go gambling or go spending, or when you have a negative thought. Or it could be more action-based, say taking your pet on a walk around the neighborhood, or having a pizza once in a while, or a healthier pizza with a friend later on in the week and planning with them for a social activity. Even though it may take so much to get out of the house, this one activity is something that you enjoy doing with a friend that you enjoy spending time with. So as you can see, coming up with whatever you want to call it, a mental health plan, a safety plan, a suicide prevention plan, is coming up with all of this is not that hard. And it's an important activity for your mental health, just like having a plan, say, for your physical health as well. To increase the chances of your plan being more successful, it should be realistic and attainable. Just like how losing 100 pounds in, say, a month for a weight loss goal is not realistic and probably not possible, at least for the majority of us, some safety plans can be made even more realistic too. So it's better than having no plan at all, of course, but it can always be improved upon and of course updated. Say if you develop new habits, then you want to think about that and develop some insight into that, and then come up with a plan to address newer habits that may not be so bad, or new emotions that may come up. For example, say all of a sudden you start getting angry. or start getting very depressed when you wake up in the morning. So to address that kind of behavior and things, and this takes a lot of self-reflection and insight to come up with this. But talking to someone could definitely be helpful. So consider discussing your mental health plan with a professional to give you more tips and to make your plan more personalized to your needs. So I hope this helps a lot. And so thanks for watching. If you want to look for some resources, check out the description for more helpful and supportive content.